Ladies and gentlemen. So, welcome to the period between World War I and World War II and the dictators that came to power. If you hear gunfire in the background, or whatever noises you might hear, my husband's playing The Witcher, so that's why you hear noises. If you see what time it is, neither one of us are technically working right now, even though I am. It's because I love you guys. Anywho, okay, let's get to this. So, you're watching the video, which means you don't have to watch this one because I'm going to include it in the video. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to read the directions. Watch the video and or read the PDF files. Yay, you're watching the video. Step 2, answer the questions in Google Forms. So here's our Google form. So we're going to pull this up so that we see it while we're reading. So you can click on it. And you should be doing the same thing because you can pause the video and answer the questions as you see them. So we're going to drag this over, let go, and then click on Google Classroom. This one we got to try it again. So drag it over. There we go. So now you can see the questions and you can see your classwork. Okay, so we're going to click on from World War I to World War II because section 1 of our questions is from World War I to World War II. Okay, so let's click on this. We're going to read it together. Okay, like I said, if you find an answer, pause the video and answer it as we're doing this. Okay, so here we go. Although World War II did not officially begin until 1939, the root of the conflict dated all the way back to the end of World War I. World War I took place from 1914 to 1918. Germany, which had lost World War I, was forced to get rid of most of its army, pay back huge debts, and ultimately take blame for the destruction caused by the war. This left the nation in a very bad state. The Germans were left feeling bitter and resentful toward the rest of the war. So if you remember that comic where I had you analyze the horse that was towing all that stuff and the horse was up in the air, I'll see if I can get a picture to put up in the corner. That was basically explaining how Germany was just overwhelmed with the amount of consequences from that war. Okay, so I mean, if you think about it, if you feel that you've been punished unfairly, you're going to be bitter. All right, so next paragraph. The stock market crashed in the United States at the end of 1929, sending the country into a statewide economic depression. An economic depression is a period of time in which there is tremendous strain on a country's economy, and many people within the nation are without jobs. Unfortunately, the depression that followed the U.S. stock market crash of 1929 ended up spreading throughout the rest of the world. Banks closed, businesses failed, and millions of people lost their jobs in what became a global economic depression. This time, the economic struggle left people in many countries looking for leaders who could help their countries recover. So we just went over the Great Depression, the stock market crash. That should be fresh in your mind. All right, third paragraph. Very strong leaders began rising to power in several European countries. The people in these countries valued the strength that these leaders seemed to have, and these new leaders also promised to restore the countries to power. These were exactly the types of leaders that the struggling people wanted to believe in. Many of these leaders were dictators, or rulers who had absolute or total power of a government. In fact, some of these leaders had big plans for restoring power to their nations. They could even be described as being power hungry. Benito Mussolini was the first dictator to come to power when he took control of Italy in 1922. Mussolini wanted to expand his home country of Italy by conquering other countries. So he invaded Ethiopia in 1935. A few years earlier in 1933, wouldn't that be later? No, 35. A few years earlier in 1933, Adolf Hitler became the ruler of the Nazi Party in Germany. Hitler quickly rose to power in Germany by offering hope to the desperate Germans who were looking for their country to be restored in the aftermath of World War I. Around the same time, Japan's government was also going through a period of change. The Japanese military, led by a man who would later become known as Emperor Hirohito, was used force to take over the Japanese government. Because Japan is an island nation that has very limited natural resources, Emperor Hirohito and his military forces planned to take control of other nearby Asian nations in order to secure more resources and grow Japanese economy. So you should be seeing in this paragraph, you should be seeing a lot of similarities. All of these dictators are planning to make their country better by doing very similar things. Okay, so let's see. Let's check up on our questions here. Like I said, you can pause this at any time and answer these questions. So according to the first paragraph of the text, when did the root problems of World War II really begin? All right, so if we go back up, we go back up to the first paragraph, it tells you, all right, when it actually began. Why was Germany so angry? You're going to find that in the first paragraph too. Explain how the Great Depression allowed dictators like Hitler to come into power. All right, so that's going to be the second paragraph. You might be able to find something in the third, but mostly the second paragraph. Explain how the rest of the world responded to dictators that came into power in the 1930s. So we might not have an answer for that yet. Oh, there we go. The rest of the world. There's our paragraph. So explain how the rest of the world responded to dictators that came into power in the 1930s. The rest of the world initially turned a blind eye as these dictators rose to power and began taking aggressive military action. Countries like Great Britain and France hoped to keep peace in the world through appeasement, which means to keep other countries happy by leaving them alone. Sadly, their lack of action had the opposite effect. Their passivity, which means not doing anything, gave the dictators in Germany, Japan, and Italy all the time and space they needed to gain strength and power. The dictators were able to complete all of the takeovers that they had planned. So, list and describe how 3 dictators came into power. You've got the 3 dictators in here. Actually, there's 4. So you can answer that question by going through the whole text. In here, you've got that last paragraph is going to answer, explain how the rest of the world. Okay, so next we are going to look at the dictators themselves. Here we go. All right, so here's our question. So we're done with this one. And now we're looking at the dictators themselves. All right. So, first question, describe the relationship between Hitler and Stalin. So this one you're going to have to do some comparing and contrasting after we read this. They're not going to be like right in this paragraph it says. Describe the relationship between Hitler and Mussolini. Why is fascism and communism favored by dictators? Explain how dictators of Italy and Germany rose to power in a similar way. Explain the meaning of the word dictator in your own words. Okay, so those are your questions for this reading. Let's get to it. What is a dictator? A dictator with absolute or total power who uses aggressive military tactics to secure their goals. Dictators usually only lose their power when they are overthrown or killed. What is communism? A system in which everyone works. The government owns businesses, factories, etc., and the wealth of the nation is divided equally amongst the people. What is fascism? A system in which the government is more important than its citizens. Leaders take away rights of citizens to gain more power for the government. Many freedoms, such as speech, expression, and religion, are sometimes taken away. What is a monarchy? A system of government that is ruled by a royal family or a royal person, and the king or queen who is in charge usually has total power. Monarchs typically rule until they die, and they are often succeeded, which means somebody else in their family takes over. So by another member of the royal family. Now we're going to look at Joseph Stalin. The country, Soviet Union. Alliance, Axis powers. The United States were allies, so they were an enemy. Political approach, communism and dictatorship. Joseph Stalin was the communist dictator of the Soviet Union from 1929 to 1953. His real name was Djavsdalai, but he earned the name Stalin, a name he certainly lived up to later in life, which means man of steel, when he served time in jail as a young man for criminal activities. During his long reign, Stalin helped the Soviet Union evolve from being a country with measly, poor beginnings to being an industrial superpower. He achieved this by implementing extremely harsh measures that led to many deaths while he was in power. For example, his great purges killed off or imprisoned any political opponents that he had. Stalin made a pact with Hitler to divide Eastern Europe between their two countries in 1939. But Hitler broke the pact and invaded the Soviet Union during Project Barbarossa just a couple years later. In response to this German invasion, Stalin decided to team up with the Allied powers and began utilizing the industrial strength of his country that he had relentlessly built up prior to the war to help the Allies. Stalin's Red Army became the most powerful military force in the world, and they were engaged in constant fighting with the Germans throughout the war. Some historians estimate that a quarter of the entire population of the Soviet Union died during World War II. Although his methods were often inhumane, many people believe that Stalin's extreme rule was the only way that the Soviet Union was able to defeat Germany during the war. Now, okay, so just a quick little explanation here. Joseph Stalin started out being an Axis power. Then when Germany backstabbed them, they switched sides and became an ally. All right, Benito Mussolini, country, Italy, alliance, Axis powers, again, another enemy. Political approach, fascism, dictatorship. Benito Mussolini was drafted into the Italian army during World War I. After the war, Italy struggled to recover as a nation, so Mussolini stepped up with a new political party. He rallied and organized unemployed and desperate war veterans in order to spread the idea of fascism. Then, he made himself dictator and set the lofty goal of re-establishing Italy as a great world power. Mussolini formed the Pact of Steel with Germany in 1939, and he also began introducing anti-Jewish laws in Italy with the influence of Hitler. Italy's army was not nearly as strong as the rest of the world powers, so it suffered many defeats. Mussolini begged Hitler to make peace with Great Britain and America, but Hitler refused. In July 1943, Mussolini was overthrown by a group of frustrated Italians who didn't like his leadership. Fortunately for Mussolini, Hitler rescued him and used him to lead some of the German forces that occupied parts of Italy at the time. In September of 1943, Italy, which was no longer under Mussolini's rule, signed an armistice, or a peace agreement with the Allied powers. As the Allies advanced through Italy, Mussolini had no choice but to flee towards Switzerland, and he was eventually captured and assassinated on April 28th, 1945. Hey, I'm recording it. I don't know how many. It was today. It was today a long time ago that he was assassinated. Go figure. Actually, when you guys watch this, it'll be yesterday, but either way. All right. Emperor Hirohito. Country, Japan. My husband's just correcting me. It's Hirohito. Country, Japan. Alliance, Axis powers. Political approach, a monarchy. There is much debate about Emperor Hirohito's role in World War II. Some scholars believe that he was essentially a powerless constitutional monarch who simply served as the Emperor of Japan, while others believe he played a much more active role in the war. Hirohito believed the Emperor of Japan after his father's death, which was right around the same time as Japan's military began to revolt and take control of the government. The military began using aggressive and harsh policies to invade other Asian countries and expand Japan's control. Japan's involvement in World War II began with an attack on Pearl Harbor, and it ended after the United States dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, as Hirohito announced the end of the war to the world. Now the one you've all heard of, Adolf Hitler. Country, Germany. Alliance, Axis powers. Political approach, fascism and dictatorship. Adolf Hitler served in the German army during World War I, despite the fact that he was an Austrian citizen. He fought on the front lines during the war and won many bravery medals. The outcome of the war embittered him and increased his German patriotism, and he continued working for the German government after the war. Hitler soon gained notoriety for his passionate devotion to Germany and for his ideas on how to help Germany rise to power. Fun fact about Adolf Hitler and his service in World War I. The reason he has the mustache that he has is because the gas mask that he had to wear while he was fighting in the trenches in World War I, he had to shave his facial hair so that he could have contact, and that's why he's got the mustache, and he just kind of kept it that way. Anyway, so everyone was desperate when the Great Depression hit the world in the early 1930s, especially the Germans who were still recovering from their defeat in World War I. Hitler ran for chancellor in 1932, winning easily based on his promising words to bring Germany back to the top of the world order. He used this position of power to form a dictatorship within the government. In 1933, Hitler announced that the Nazi Party would be the only legal party in Germany, and soon thereafter he withdrew from the League of Nations and began building up his army. Hitler had grand plans of taking over as much of Europe as possible. Hitler's invasion of Poland in 1939 marked the beginning of World War II. He formed an alliance with Italy and Japan, a group that would later become known as the Axis powers, to help strengthen his fight. Hitler's aggressive military tactics seemed to be effective at first, but things changed after the United States became involved in the war. After the Japanese attack at Pearl Harbor brought the United States into the fight, Hitler found himself facing three of the most powerful nations in the world: the United States, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union, both financially and in terms of military size. Hitler continued to fight for several years, but by the start of 1945, he realized that his country was on the road to defeat. After hearing about Mussolini's assassination, Hitler committed suicide, leaving Germany and the Nazi Party to finish the war without a leader. Another fun fact, there are lots of conspiracies that he actually didn't commit suicide. Do some Googling, see what you think. Anyway, so that is the end of the reading. But this video is actually real footage that they showed United States citizens during the war to show what the dictators were doing. So you'll actually get to see in this video the dictators in action. All right, so I'm actually going to stop this.
Yes, in these lands, the people surrendered their liberties and threw away their human dignity. They gave up their rights as individual human beings. They became a part of a mass, a human herd. Although these countries were far apart and different in custom and in language, the same poison made them much alike. Each got a new uniform. In Italy, the new bosses wore black shirts. In Germany, the shirts were brown. In Japan, they hid behind the uniform of the army. But really, they belonged to a sinister, secret society. Their symbol was a black dragon. The other fellows had to have a symbol, too. Germany, a swastika. In Italy, the old Roman symbol of the Passport. In Germany, they called the new order National Socialism, or Nazism. In Italy, they had a shorter word, fascism. In Japan, they had lots of names for it. The new era of enlightenment. The new order in Asia. The co-prosperity sphere. But no matter how you slice it, it was just plain old-fashioned militaristic imperialism. The Japs would get the prosperity, and the others would get the coal. They say trouble always comes in threes. Take a good close look at this trio. Remember these faces. Remember them.
So right here, let's get rid of that. So right here we have Hirohito, Hitler, and Mussolini. So that's who these three men are. These are the dictators that this video is talking about and that we just read about.
Well, if you ever meet them, don't hesitate.
Eine wahrhaftige Weltanschauungspartei sein. Die zweitens, die wollten
Stop thinking and follow me, cried Hitler. I will make you masters of the world. The people answered, Heil! Stop thinking and believe in me, bellowed Mussolini, and I will restore the glory that was Rome. The people answered, Duce, Duce. Stop thinking and follow your God Emperor, cried the Japanese warlords, and Japan will rule the world. And the people answered, Banzai, Banzai. Each system was alike in that the constitutional law-making bodies gave up their power. The Reichstag in Berlin, the House of Deputies in Rome, the Diet in Tokyo. And these elected representatives became collections of stooges, rubber stamp organizations. Applauding on cue the words of the leaders. Each system did away with free speech and free assembly.
So all of these countries, all these dictators took away the right to speak your mind. You could not say, I think I should probably edit that out. No one could say, I think Hitler's an idiot. You would probably be killed for saying that back then. Nobody could say, I don't agree with Mussolini. They would be killed for saying something like that. You could not, the assembly, this public assembly of more than 5 persons is strictly forbidden. Violators will be prosecuted. Now, I know that sounds like now, but now is a completely different reason than it was back then. Back then, they were doing it to eliminate people gathering and saying, hey, we should stop these guys before they get even more powerful. Now it's to keep us safe. Back then, it was to prevent people from overthrowing these dictators.
Each system did away with a free press and substituted a press controlled by the party. Through their ministries of...
Took away free press, so you couldn't write a newspaper article saying, Mussolini has gone too far or Hitler has gone too far. You could not do that. All of the newspapers became controlled by the government. So the only thing you read, the only thing you heard about was what the government wanted you to hear about.
Propaganda each took complete control of the theater, the movies, the radio. Every cultural activity and every channel of information was controlled by the most important members of the party. Each did away with free courts and trial by jury, and substituted courts and judges run by the party. Each enforced its decrees by an army of secret police who held the power of life and death over every individual. And for the few who still believed in freedom and said so, there was a ready answer.
The only application of brute force used continuously and ruthlessly can bring about the decision in favor of the side it supports. Mein Kampf, which is actually a book Hitler wrote when he was younger. All of these newspaper headlines are from the United States, and so it was reported over here. And if you look at the headlines as these are going past, they all are talking about people that disagreed with these dictators. plain as murder. To silence him.
While in Japan,
Murdered by rebels, the dictators.
to their names can be added those of hundreds and thousands of others who stood in the way of the new order.
All right, so there is our video. Let me get back to class assignment. Okay, so when you're done answering those questions, make sure you click turn it in. I can't see it. I won't know that you did it unless you turned it in. All right, so any questions, leave it in comments, or make sure you show up to the Zoom meetings on Tuesday or Thursday. I need you to come to either one, either Tuesdays or Thursdays every week. Come to one of them. All right, that's where I can answer questions more easily, but you can comment on the assignment if you have questions too. I'll see you in the next video.